Hey, it's a Bible Forum. We're here. It's Sunday night. We're talking all things life, God, and you. I want to talk to you about a new movie that's just come out. It's called The Circle. The Circle demonstrates how a truly laudable concept, the concept of transparency, can be corrupted for very bad reasons and to very bad ends. In a speech before a millennial audience, techno-billionaire Eamon Bailey, played by Tom Hanks in the movie, persuasively argues that people's lives should be an open book because of all the good that can come of it. In the movie, they're talking about putting your business on the street, managing, looking at, keeping track of everything you do, say, think, or whatever. But unfortunately, some congressional Republicans seem to have internalized the same idea. Senators Orrin Hatch of Utah and Bill Cassidy of Louisiana, both Republicans, along with Senator Marco Rubio and leftist Democrat colleagues, are working to help Bailey's fantasy come true. Here's the background. There is in our world, in our government, a Commission on Evidence-Based Policy Making, CEP, which Congress established to explore the possibility and effectiveness of expanding citizen surveillance and tracking systems in the name of a better world, better analyzing the value of federal programs. Data mongers who have testified before CEP have almost uniformly endorsed the idea of a federal data warehouse of highly personal citizen information. And one possibility CEP is considering is whether to allow a federal student unit record system. This would enable the federal government to collect personally identifiable information on individual higher education students and link that data to lifelong workforce data. Because a unit record tracking system is anathema to a free society, the federal law currently prohibits that. But opposition is growing. There are people in our political system, and there are organizations such as the American Principles Project to the American Civil Liberties Union who want to see this happen. Our so-called conservative Marco Rubio joined Democrat Senator Ron Wyden of Washington to erase the prohibition through the proposed Student Right to Know Before You Go Act, so higher education data can be matched with workforce data. Rubio argues that without this tool, how could prospective students possibly know they'll earn more studying engineering instead of queer theory? Note the premise of the bill, that higher education is valuable primarily to the extent it increases lifetime earnings. Are all the teachers out there wasting their time? And don't you think that somebody studying engineering is going to make more money than somebody who's studying medieval French poetry? Hatch and Cassidy apparently think the Rubio bill isn't sufficiently totalitarian, so they've teamed up with Senators Elizabeth Warren and Sheldon Whitehouse from Rhode Island, both Democrats, to offer their own surveillance and tracking bill, which they call the College Transparency Act of 2017. Yes, Big Brother is now calling himself transparency. Is this what conservatism has become? The new totalitarian bill seeks the same goal as Rubio's, but requires even more radical means of getting there. The legislation would establish a federal data system, quote, to accurately evaluate student enrollment patterns, progression, completion, and post-collegiate outcomes, as well as higher education costs and financial aid at the student level. Thus, the new federal database would contain not aggregate data across various groups of students, but personally identifiable information on individual students. And it would be created without the input of student or parent groups. Can't have the lab rats interfering with the experience or experiment. Here's the worst of it, though. The bill requires sharing of private student data among various federal agencies, including the U.S. Department of Education's Office of Federal Student Aid, the Department of Treasury, the Department of Defense, the Department of Veterans Affairs, the Social Security Administration, and the Bureau of Census. This is not an exclusive list. It's not all of it. So an individual's personally identifiable student loan data can be linked to his tax information and his military information and his Social Security records and everything the Census Bureau knows about him, which, if he filled out the long form, is pretty much everything about his life, and it will follow him for the rest of his life. And there doesn't seem to be any limits on the purposes for which this data matching can take place. The only limits will exist in the bureaucrat's imagination. Now, how is this compatible with privacy and property rights? Although the legislation indirectly references widely accepted fair information practice principles as the standard for data compilation and maintenance, it violates many of the very same principles. It takes an individual's data without their knowledge or consent. It provides no right to opt out, to inspect, or to correct. It includes no mandate for data minimization. It has no limitations on the data retention. This treasure trove of personally identifiable information is going to be housed in a centralized federal warehouse that is routinely updated throughout a citizen's life. Every time you change your job or your salary or military status or whatever it might be, the government dossier is going to be revised, that they might maintain a current, accurate link with what you've done and are doing. It is a lifelong surveillance in the name of transparency. Can you say 666? The bill does require that student-level data disclosed to them be de-identified, no names. But as any information technology professional will tell you, that ain't going to happen. When there are so many data points in the system on any one individual, reliable de-identification is a pipe dream. The bill also takes a disturbingly casual approach to data security. It pays lip service to data security and data privacy, two different concepts the legislation improperly conflates. They put them together falsely. Security meaning protecting the data in the system, privacy meaning determining whether a government of the people should be collecting that data in the first place. But it doesn't require security audits, encryption, or detection and notification of breaches. So the federal government, which isn't famous for doing anything well, and has already demonstrated a shocking incompetence at protecting data, is now going to be creating an enormously attractive and unsecured data jackpot for hackers and thieves. Security concerns aside, compiling mountains of personal data on American citizens fundamentally changes the relationship between the individual and their government. It has an intimidating effect on citizens, even if the data is never used. Everyone, regardless of political ideology, should agree that this kind of surveillance is simply unacceptable. This is a free society, or was. All Americans need to contact Senators Hatch, Cassidy, Warren, Warehouse, Rubio, anybody you can think of, and remind them what limited government actually means. Jane Robbins is a senior fellow with the American Principles Project in Washington, D.C. She's a graduate of our own Clemson University and Harvard Law School. Emmett McGroarty is director of APP Education and attorney with degrees from Georgetown University and Fordham School of Law. These are the people who are looking at this and telling us this ought not to be. Now, the Bible describes a day when the names, the dates, the financial information on every human being on the earth, that's questionable, is going to be available in a database. I say it's questionable because it's difficult to visualize the more primitive societies with computer chips in their heads or their hands and knowing what to do with them. However, it may be that those folks won't be here. The days of 666, the infamous number, come after years of serious global warfare, famine, pestilence, wipes out almost half the world's population. In one instance alone, a meteor takes out a third of the population by itself. This is a time period with clear distinctions. Either you are identified with the ruler of this earth or you're a target. You cannot buy or sell. You cannot therefore eat or be sheltered without help. You will be hunted down. You will be put to death. The Bible speaks of those who were beheaded for the cause of Christ. Meaning, only those who love God more than self will refuse the mark of the beast, meaning this undefinable tyrant, undefinable due to his unique station, who will be issuing what can only be, in our right now, computer chips that can be scanned. It's been very hard to difficult to picture the situation over the years for a lot of reasons. But even now, we live in America. These things don't happen here. We're a Christian nation. Surely God will protect us. All this is light years away. It's in the far distant future. Of course, if you're paying attention, you realize it's not that far off. Everything is in place. We are in the ascendancy again. Our president has recently returned from a very successful global trip. He met with the Pope, who clearly disagrees with everything the president stands for, beginning with America. He met with the Saudis, who clearly liked what he stood for. He met with the Israelis, who clearly liked what he stood for. He met with Europeans, who clearly did not like what he stood for. He scolded them and belittled them, and they took it stoically. All in all, the trip is being hailed as successful. In what way? Well, the world now knows there's a new sheriff in town. He has ideas, goals, purposes, plans he intends to pursue. He's a man who has always gotten what he wanted. Even if it meant losing a battle or two, he still wins the wars that matter. He understands people and business, meaning he can get things done, and he can't be bullied. So if North Korea is serious, if Russia is serious, if Islam is serious, if China is serious, there's going to be trouble. Europe is drowning in so-called migrants. They won't even tell their people how many or how dangerous they really are. Europe is also drowning in debt and undercapitalization. The United States is suddenly on track to grow financially over the next few years. We have a president committed to getting control of our borders. The media is learning their time-tested tactics don't work on the Donald. Democratic leadership is begging their people and the media to back off on this whole idea of impeachment. It's a no-win situation. It's just making them look silly. Saudi Arabia is begging the United States to cut their oil production. We're putting them out of business over there. U.S. companies that do business overseas are shutting down those operations. They're moving back home. There's a new wind blowing. Those who operate in the dark are finding it very uncomfortable. There will be a kind of sort of deal between Israel and the PLO. Trump will take credit. There will be an uneasy and pragmatic union of Sunni Arabs with the United States in order to defeat Iran's plans for the region. Iran is Shiite. The Arabs are Sunni. They don't go along. There will be a rise in Turkish expansionism, pitting them against Russia in terms of Syria. China is the sleeping giant who appears only interested in protecting her own territory and economy while they're keeping their eye on possibilities. And the economy of the world will continue to struggle. But it's all moving. It's moving inexorably toward what the Bible refers to as Armageddon. What's the next movement of God? In the Bible, the next movement of God is the rapture of the bride of Christ, the removal of the saints of God, removing that church before the beginning of the cleansing of the earth starts. When God begins to cleanse the place of these interlopers, men who seek to dominate the earth, dominate God's inheritance while rejecting the King and his heir, Jesus. And all this in preparation for his glorious and definitive return, a return to drive off unbelief, get it off this planet, to destroy these rulers, and to establish his kingdom at Jerusalem. I believe when you see millions of people simply disappear from the earth, the time will be short. The chaos this will facilitate will give every demigod on earth the opportunity to consolidate his power. The result's going to be war, famine, pestilence, destruction. The Bible teaches us that this time a Western leader will rise to take control. He'll have help from 10 other Western leaders, the Bible calls them kings, who will govern with him a world divided into 10 parts. The United Nations did that decades ago. They've restructured those 10 parts several times, but they exist. They even have names for them. The king, he will have a religious leader who is identified as a beast from the earth, indescribable human being. He will cause all men under the leader's authority to receive a mark that they might buy and sell. You can see the total control that's going to be exercised. And it's going to be necessary because of the emergency that's taking control of the planet. Millions of people have disappeared. We don't know where they are. A meteor has taken out an entire continent of people, perhaps the whole Western Hemisphere. Upwards of 40% of the world's population have died in war or pestilence or famine or some other thing. Wars are being waged. Israel is under attack from her neighbors. Gog, which is Turkey, and eventually Persia, will come in as spoilers to take control. They'll all come against Israel, and it'll all be destroyed by the King of this earth, the Lord Jesus Christ. He will come with an innumerable army of angels and with the Old Testament saints, along with his bride, the church, and Israel will be preserved. The Bible tells us that only 1/3 of the number of Jews on the planet at the time of this will actually survive, and only because God will protect them. And they will inhabit the New Jerusalem, and Jesus will be their king, their promised king, their promised prophet, and their promised priest. And when is all this going to happen? Well, soon, and very soon. All the pieces are lining up. You ready?